for recording. So just make sure I get the right window. So can I just check, is that okay? We're seeing the PowerPoint on full screen?
Yes, I can, James. Yeah, I can just see the slides.
Okay, that's brilliant. Charlotte, if you're okay to hit record now, and then we'll...
It's recording.
Yeah, I've done so. It's recording now, hopefully.
Fantastic, that's great. So the first thing then I want to do is just welcome everyone that's attending live with us today. It's really nice to see there's been so much interest in the webinar today, and we're really looking forward to you being part of this and hopefully being able to contribute as well. I just wanted to introduce myself and then I'll let Sheena introduce herself as well. So my name's James Rathbone. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm currently working in the trust in a split role. So I'm doing part of my time working in the oncology service and then part of my time in staff wellbeing. So that's why I'm here with you today. I've had previous roles. Before I joined Sherwood, I worked at Derby Children's Hospital, working in paediatrics. So I have a bit of background in working and supporting children as well, although my role at the moment is primarily working with adults. Sheena, are you able to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Sheena Palmer. Some of you may know me from previous webinars already. Just to say that I am a clinical psychologist. I work in adult sexual health, but I also have been working for the past 5 years until last year in children and adolescent mental health services, so in CAMS. So I do feel like I've got quite a bit of experience working with children, especially with mental health difficulties. So I'm really glad that you're here and I'm looking forward to getting started.
Thanks, Sheena. So I'm just going to do a brief bit of housekeeping and preparation before we get going. So we just ask that everybody that's here today, if you just switch your camera off and mute yourselves, it just stops us from having those kind of interruptions where we're not often sure where the sound is coming from. But we do really want you to engage with us as part of the webinar. So, if you could use that chat function and add any comments, questions and things as we go along, then we really appreciate that. What we're going to do is myself and Sheena are going to split that time monitoring that, but also we've got our colleague Claire, who's also a clinical psychologist and has recently joined the staff wellbeing team, and she's also going to be monitoring that box for us and adding any links and things. And then when we get to the question and answer section right at the end of the webinar, she's going to feedback some of those questions, and hopefully we'll have plenty of time. Just to say, we are recording the webinar. We've got an hour for today's session. It might be that if we get a lot of interaction, a lot of questions, that we go over that, but we just wanted to highlight that you don't need to stay beyond what you're able to do, and the recording will be available afterwards. But if there's a lot of really good interaction and questions, we might end up going a little bit over the hour, but we'll try and keep to time. Our contact details are there, myself and Sheena, if you do want to kind of follow up with any information or questions, and also really encourage you, if you're on Twitter, to follow the our cancer psychology team Twitter. We post kind of interesting stuff on there, and it's really a great way to interact with you. We really appreciate feedback from the session as well. You'll see the QR code in the top corner. If you've got a QR scanner, you can scan that and it'll take you to an evaluation site. There's also a link for the evaluation, which again I'll ask Claire to post in the chat function for us if you want to kind of use that direct link. We'll show it again at the end as well for anybody. And I guess the final thing from our perspective is for you to think of this as a bit of a workshop opportunity. So really consider what you want to get out of this time, and be prepared to ask those questions as well, rather than it just being what we deliver to you. But on that, I guess I want to think about what the aims are for today's session. So we really want to use this time to think about the impact of the pandemic on children, as well as on us as parents, or whatever role that we take in supporting children. So, for example, some people here might be grandparents and supporting children in a different role. And we want to consider how we interact with our children during these unusual times, because this might have changed quite a lot over the last 12 months. So we want to think about some of the simple ways, the simple things that we can do to reduce the impact of the pandemic and the current situation. And finally, we want to acknowledge some of the research and resources that are out there, as well as the support that's available to you if you find that you're struggling with the well-being of your children. So I think before we get started, it's important to point out that we appreciate you'll all have children of different ages and at different stages of development. And I guess it would be too challenging for us to try and cover all of those different stages of development in the limited time that we have together. So we're going to be trying to look at things a bit more broadly and across the age range during this time. So we'll be thinking right from infants all the way up to late teenagers as well. But before we start the actual presentation part, we wanted to check in with those of you that have joined us live today and ask you a question. So really quite briefly, you don't need to write a lot, and only if you feel really comfortable to do this, but I want you to type in the chat box anything that you've noticed about the impact of the pandemic on your children or your family recently. And I'm just going to give us a minute or so to do that. So, you know, maybe you've noticed changes in behaviour, changes in your relationship, or changes in the environment or the routines that have had a big impact. You know, whatever it is, give us a brief idea of what it is that you've noticed in the children that you're responsible for and that you care for. I'm not going to pick up on these specific comments that come in right now, but if you keep adding them over the next minute or so, what Sheena's going to do when we reach the midway point, the break, is she's going to provide a bit of a summary of what comments came in. But I wanted to start the webinar with this idea that our children are our unsung heroes during the pandemic, and they really are remarkable. You know, when we stop to think about what they've had to manage and deal with over the past 12 months, you know, what they know as their normal lives has been turned completely upside down. There's been a huge disruption to their usual routines, particularly in their school environment, as you'll have seen the conversation we were having before we started about, you know, this being half term and how strange that feels. You know, they've lost that ability to interact with their friends in the way that they usually would. They've lost the ability to have adventures in the outdoors due to the restrictions and closures, you know, to run and play and explore. And where that has been allowed, there's often stricter rules and boundaries around that. So they might have even been met with hostility from others when they're out playing, because, you know, children might not always follow the national guidelines on physical distancing. And our children have had to entertain themselves in a way more than they've ever had to do, and they're spending more time alone while they're doing this. And I guess finally on this list, although, you know, the list could be much, much longer, they've had to deal with us. You know, they've had to deal with adults who are tired and stressed and worried about them as well, and that will have changed for them. You know, so it's not unlikely that we're going to see the impact of these things on our children and also more broadly in our families and our environments. So let's think about some of the challenges faced by our children and young people specific to the pandemic itself. So particularly when we think about the development of our really young children, they've had to deal with interactions with people behind masks. And we know that facial recognition is key in the early stages of development for communication. You know, I'll give a personal experience from this on Wednesday when my 1-year-old daughter had to go for her routine vaccinations at the GP practice, but she had to be supported by her mom, who was wearing a mask. So when she was in tears, having had 4 different injections, and she really wanted to look to her mom for comfort, you know, she didn't have that ability to have that facial recognition that everything was okay. And even though this was an unpleasant experience, it would be okay. It was lost in that moment because she couldn't see her mom's face. It was behind a mask. And yes, we can find other ways to do that. But it's just important to recognise that that's quite a big challenge. And we also know that children are being introduced to technology at a much younger age than they otherwise would have been. You know, it's the only way my other child, who's 2.5, gets to see his grandparents at the moment. And we'd usually be limiting screen time and focusing on engagement with the real world rather than the virtual world. So trying to find that right balance between screen time and connection with grandparents has been really hard for us. And of course, we also know that there are increased risks that are associated with time online for younger children. So we're seeing increased time online, yet limited oversight from the companies that provide the platforms for the way we interact. So we know there's been an increase in online grooming and abuse of younger children. So, for example, I don't know if anybody saw in the media yesterday about one of the social media platforms that provides video calling and chat with strangers, yet it has absolutely no age verification process. So it knows the type of people using its platform. And, you know, when we think about older children, we all know that Zoom fatigue is real. So I think it's fortunate that we're using Microsoft Teams today. So we should all be fairly safe from that. But we're asking teenagers to attend school lessons on these platforms when their brains are already trying to take in information and learning. And finally, you know, there's an increasing amount of research showing the impact of the virtual world, and particularly social media sites, on the mental health and well-being of young people. So, for example, we know that on social media it's possible to present this image of a perfect life, but that can often result in unrealistic and unachievable expectations being set in our children's minds, you know, the person that they should be, and that is impacting on children's mental health and well-being. So we're seeing an increase in the need of support for things like children's mental health services, you know, and this might be something you've experienced with your own children that you're looking after. And I guess here's the challenging part though, you still have to go to work, you know, you still have to support others, even though you're seeing this in your children, you know, and other things in life don't just stop because there's a pandemic going on. So you're dealing with all of that as well. And you might be finding it quite difficult to split yourself in two as a parent and also as an employee. So I think that brings us on to thinking about the impact on parents, on you guys and other people with responsibilities for looking after for children. You know, in particular, staff providing key services like healthcare. We know that parents would have seen a reduction in the amount of availability that they have for their children. So this might be purely your physical availability because you're working longer shifts or more shifts trying to support your teams. But it might also be in your emotional availability for children because you're exhausted when you get home from work and you've had to deal with and process challenging and traumatic situations at work before then kind of returning to that home life. And because of this, like, you know, our ability to regulate our own emotions might be reduced, which of course is going to impact on your ability to help your children regulate their emotions. And this is a key role that we take in supporting our children as we grow. So when we look at some of the research that's come out in the past year, and we acknowledge that there's actually a gender gap too, you know, that's what we're seeing. So when doing paid work from home in particular, women tend to be more adversely affected than men. And the evidence suggests this is because women are more likely to be spending their work hours simultaneously trying to care for children as well. And we can see in this graph from the Office of National Statistics that looks at life satisfaction, you know, it's largely remained stable for men during the pandemic, but has significantly reduced for women. And there's a reference there for two research studies which explore this further. And they've shown that women's mood, so here we're talking about measures of depression, women's mood is worse during lockdowns with higher levels of loneliness reported, whereas men's mood has actually been found to improve during periods of lockdown. And so I guess here I'd highlight as well, this is not going to be true of everyone. So individually here today, you might have had a completely different experience to this. But I think it's important to highlight that that gender gap does exist when we're thinking about the impact of the pandemic on children and families. So, you know, given we know that these challenges exist, you know, what might this look like in the real world? What might you be seeing? And I want to really emphasize here that you as a parent or the person that's responsible for the child, you know, you're the expert. You know your child better than anyone else. You've watched them grow and develop along the way, and you know what's normal for them and what things look like when they change. So you might have observed changes in their usual behavior, and these might be small and subtle things, or they might be significant changes that are really concerning for you. And this emotional cup image here from Cam's on the side of the slide, you know, it highlights what might happen when your child's emotional cup is empty. It also lists some of the things that you can do to help refill your child's cup, and what other things might happen and what might lead to your child's cup becoming empty. So, you know, take a look at those bullet points. Do any of those look like they're going to be more common during a pandemic? You know, I think that's the case. So I think for me, the real take-home message from that image is that, you know, children know when their cup is getting empty. You know, they can feel it, but they might not necessarily have the words to express it. And so what tends to happen is this comes out as a behaviour because they're not able to describe it. And then what can happen, quite understandably, because our capacity is also reduced, is we become very focused on the behaviour itself, and we fail to recognise the emotion that might be underlying the behaviour, or we fail to recognise that our child's cup is empty and needs to be refilled. So I guess we really want to be trying to look beyond the behaviour to focus on what emotion might be driving it. So maybe the behaviour is because your child is scared or worried about school, the future, or maybe they're worried about their own health or the health of others. You know, maybe they're feeling sad or lonely or bored, and this is what's driving that behaviour. And we know in particular for loneliness, it's considered a key risk factor of lockdown for the mental health and well-being of children and young people. So some current research suggests that 50% of 16 to 24-year-olds have experienced lockdown loneliness. And the authors of that research have suggested that it's a consequence of the loss of peer group support during what is an important development stage, you know, where peer interaction is important for brain development, but also construction of their own self-concept. So, given we know all of this, like, how do we respond to our children and young people? And for me, this is about recognizing that as adults, we are there to provide a secure base for our children, you know, a safe pair of hands. And this image from Cooper, Hoffman and Powell shows how we might provide that sense of security to our children as they explore the world. And this isn't just for us that are looking after children with parental responsibility. You know, this is for peers as well. Yet what we know is children have experienced a massive reduction in these other areas of support. So, you know, they're not spending time at school with their friends. You know, they're not receiving direct input from their teachers and teaching assistants. So there's a greater need for us to hold our children in this way during a pandemic. And I guess here the real challenge is, like, how can you support safe exploration for your child when you're worried about their well-being? You know, you don't always have the answers for what's going to happen next. I mean, we don't know it ourselves as adults, what will be happening in the next few months. But it is really important that we support exploration when we can, to allow our children to build confidence. It's important that we're curious about our child's worries and show empathy when they raise their concerns with us. You know, and we can correct misunderstandings that our children might have, as long as we're not dismissive of their experience. And I guess the final point on here is we can try to encourage a level of control where it's possible. You know, it's likely that our children have experienced a massive reduction in the amount of control that they have. You know, so maybe this is as simple as giving them a choice about what they're having for dinner, or how or where they exercise. I want to give like another brief personal example here, particularly my experience from when we first went into lockdown right back at the start of 2020. And you'll all remember we were allowed this 1 hour of exercise per day. So my wife and I would take our then he was nearly 2 years old son to the park to get that exercise. And of course, we were trying to get him to maintain this 2 meter distance from others because that was what the rules were. But after a few weeks, we started noticing that our son was getting scared of anybody that was walking towards us. So he would point at them, and in a really quite scared voice, he would go, you know, people, 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 before trying to get out of their way. And we realized that as we tried to teach him to maintain a safe distance from others. He was starting to fear the people that he was coming across, and this is simply because a 2-year-old just has no concept of a virus or why you'd need to stay 2 meters away from others. But as parents, we really didn't want him to be scared of being outside or scared of people or going to the park. And I remember my wife and I sitting having a conversation with this after he'd gone to bed one evening and realizing that we needed to try and do something to help and stop him from being scared of everyone, because he's always been such a happy and smiley boy until that point. And so, as parents, we've always tried to name emotions for him anyway. That's part of what we do. So we tried to acknowledge that he was scared in those situations. But we also tried to correct that misunderstanding by highlighting that he didn't need to be afraid of people. So, to do this, what we did is when we were at the park, we got down alongside him at his level. And as people approached, we encouraged him to wave and say hello and to engage with them. And this wasn't like an instant cure. It took a fair few weeks before we could, before it had an impact, and he started kind of engaging with that interaction with other people. But before long, we found that it was nearly impossible to stop him shouting hello to every stranger that he saw along the way. But there was a real double benefit to that strategy and to engaging with, because actually it facilitated a connection for us with other people that were out and about. And I've talked in one of our previous webinars about that I don't necessarily believe this should have been called social distancing. It should have been called physical distancing, because there's a big difference. We do need to physically distance, but actually that social engagement and connection with other people is really, really important. So, there was a double impact of that, both for the child, but also for us. So when Sheena and I were preparing for this webinar, and we got together a couple of times to discuss it, we kind of discussed about the fact that we had this sense that we needed to come up with like answers or fixes or deliver like a long list of strategies. And we were finding that really, really, really hard to do. And what we realized is because you can't really whittle down all of the different strategies that we might use and approaches to a few PowerPoint slides and deliver it in a 30 to 40 minute presentation or session. But even more so than that, there aren't really any fix-it strategies right now. We're still in the middle of the pandemic. It's still going on for us and our children. And as long as we're dealing with this pandemic and lockdowns and restrictions, it's going to be really difficult for us all. Part of our role as adults interacting with children and young people is to anticipate things and to reassure children, because they don't have the same concept of time or things changing or understanding of the world as us. But at the moment, the only thing we can really anticipate is that it's going to be more challenging. There's going to be more challenges that we have to overcome, and things are going to be difficult, and we're going to experience sadness and loneliness and frustration. And I guess what is more like our children developing all of the time. And what works today for your child might not work tomorrow. And what works for one of your children might not work for somebody else's. So, it's just highlighting that this might not be the answer you're looking for, and maybe you were coming along hoping for some of these strategies. But we are still in the middle of this pandemic, and it is still difficult at the moment. But we wanted to kind of just put some things out there that are just good strategies anyway, like, regardless of whether we're in the middle of a pandemic or not. So, one of the things that we can do is name things for our children and normalize them. They don't know, what we know yet. They've not experienced the world like we have, and it can be confusing for them at times. So if you notice something, particularly emotions, then name it for your child, and highlight that it's something that we might all experience at different points in time, so that they feel that it's normal and not kind of a strange thing that they're experiencing it. Limiting the amount of exposure to bad news. All the time we see a number of deaths reported, more lockdowns and things like that. And as humans, we're naturally drawn to messages around threat because, in evolution, that's been a really good survival strategy. But we can limit that exposure without hiding the reality from our children. So it's finding that balance and restricting, the amount of time that we spend on that. And I guess it's just to say that, like, you know, if you are really worried about your child's mental health and well-being, then please don't feel you have to deal with it on your own. Seek some additional support. There's loads of resources out there online now. Sometimes that can feel quite overwhelming because there's so many. You don't need to know it all. You know, pick one or two and take a look and see if there's anything in there that just might be of value to you or your child, and pick it out and see what works. And if it doesn't, move on to the next thing. But also, you know, don't be afraid to seek additional support. So speak to your child's GP or seek additional support from child and adolescent mental health services. And we do appreciate that often with these services, there can be a long wait to access them. And so you might want to also look at what's available privately or in the charitable sector too, because there's often other support that's available and out there. And I guess the final thing is, like, you know, speak to your friends and family if you're struggling as well, because they might just have some really great tips, things that have worked for them in the past, and advice that can help you at the moment. But don't sit there struggling, trying to think you need to know things all on your own when there's support out there. So I want to, like, try and, as we come to the end of my section, I wanted to kind of give a key take-home message from this section, and just to say that, like, you know, the needs of children are often uncommunicated. They don't have the words to articulate what's going on for them, and so, you know, sometimes these things can go undetected. But also, children might want to avoid disclosing things because they're worried that they'll be discriminated against, whether there's a stigma attached to explaining that they're struggling. So, you know, just recognizing that they don't have that, and you know, we need to be taking this role of noticing and naming what's going on for them. And I guess if you can do nothing else, then try to do these 5 things, which is, you know, identify what your child is feeling, what emotions showing up for them, and then label that feeling for them, because they might not have those words. Make sense of the feeling in the context that they're in. So, you know, the context is that we're in the middle of a pandemic, that they're not in school, that their routine has changed, and try and problem solve ways that might help them to manage those feelings better. And I guess the final thing is to say, try and help to explain what's going on for your children to others, you know, like, so that they know what's going on as well, because they might be able to find ways to support them. And I want to just bring my section to a close with this image from the book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, because, you know, it's just something that I think is really quite important. I really like this because it acknowledges that sometimes we can't see an end point. But when that's the case, we just need to take the next small step in the direction that you want to be traveling. So you don't have to solve everything right now, but what you can do is take a small step to support your child or the young people that you're responsible for. Any small thing that just helps them to feel valued and important and acknowledged is really powerful right now, even if we don't have the answers for when this might come to an end. So that's my section done, and Sheena's going to come and do her bit next. But what I wanted right now, if you're there, whether you'd be willing, I'll just drop these slides from the screen, and I wonder if you could give us a bit of a feedback from the survey that we took at the start. Oh, you're on mute at the moment, Sheena.
There we go.
No. Yeah, that's good.
Still a year into this team, and I'm still forgetting. Now. Thank you so much for that. Quite a lot of people actually spoke about what they were saying about the survey. So a lot of them, it was about loneliness. They've noticed loneliness. That's quite a big one. Isolation, like missing their friends and family, and it's being on their own, especially if there's an only child as well, so they don't have any siblings, so that makes it a bit harder. Anxiety, feeling quite withdrawn and sad. They have also noticed lack of routine, so they're not quite doing the things that they used to do, and also their sleep perhaps has been a bit affected, so maybe some late nights, some late mornings, and all of that obviously adds up. Also, we may notice that some of our children may engage in more attention-seeking behaviour, so trying to get our attention a bit more, which is something that I definitely do experience with my son as well. Some frustration and boredom, so just because they're on their own. But interestingly, someone did put, and I'm really sorry, I can't remember who it was that put this down, but their child is a bit more relaxed. So at the idea of not having to go to school and perhaps being less judged by their peers. And I think that's really, really important, because actually it's not always that children are just upset about just being at home. It might be the opposite, and that can equally be quite worrying, because when schools do open, it's another problem, isn't it, about how do I get them to go to school and feel okay. So that's kind of what was said in the survey.
That's really great. That's some really good contributions there from people, and it just shows the variation in the way people experience the current situation. But I think it's helpful to know that people are experiencing it in similar ways, but also, what's going on for them at the moment.
In terms of just summarising, so other people have commented as well while you were talking about the slides. Just people have noticed that actually children's or young people uses of social media and the virtual world have increased, and kind of just reflecting that it's quite hard, because they do need some kind of connection, and if we can't quite provide it ourselves, then it can be quite difficult to challenge it or know where to draw the line or to have that balance with them. And it can be easier just to be like, yeah, just go on it, it's fine, but obviously at the same time it's not fine. There is the I think there was a little bit around knowing that we work in healthcare and feeling like we have a higher level of behaviour, a higher level of standard to adhere to in terms of behaviour. So feeling a bit more like we've got to be following the rules a bit more because we are the healthcare. And actually, sometimes our children, especially teenagers, might find that a bit difficult, and it can cause a bit of tension because they might see you as a parent and not necessarily just somebody that's involved in the healthcare. And sometimes if you're out in the public, if your children's interacting with others, might you get a fine, might someone kind of recognise you or and kind of snitch on you, so to speak. So it's a little bit difficult, so just kind of recognising that. And then you talked a bit about some of the things that we might try to do to help our children and young people, and one of them was the name and normalising. And actually quite a lot of people do try to do that, but it can be really hard, especially if we're feeling quite stressed, and we can kind of not be good at always implementing it. I'm certainly guilty of that myself. So that's kind of really the summary.
Thanks for that. It's really, really great to kind of get people's input from those different things. I think yeah, what you highlighted is, I think we do try and name and normalise as part of what we do as parents and looking after, but I think it's just highlighting that's really important right now where you can. Yeah.
All right, well, shall I go on to my bit of the webinar? So I'm just going to pull up my screen, my slide. Can you see that, James?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's on.
Okay, so thank you for that, James. Just to let people know that obviously I've still got my bit as well, which I really want to go through, but I do appreciate it's half term or you might be at work, so if you do need to leave at any point, that's absolutely fine. Please still do evaluate whatever you have heard, because any feedback, if not complete, is still helpful to us. And I also just wanted to put out a reminder that a lot of what I am going to be talking about had been covered in previous webinars. I think Claire is going to share a link at some point in the chat, which had a link for all the links to the webinars that Sam Malins, James and myself have hosted, along with other people that you may have seen like Sancho and Joe Levine as well. So please do access it if you haven't already, and it's also a good reminder to kind of refresh yourself, especially now that we're on this end of the year or at the start of another year of COVID. So that's all I just wanted to say. So for this part, I just wanted to think a bit more about, well, what can we do to support our children and young people? Following on from what James was saying, the biggest challenge that our children and young people are facing is uncertainty. and not just mild uncertainty, but kind of extreme uncertainty, and actually for over a long period of time, consistently or constantly, there seemed to be no breaks from the uncertainty. And as you know, that can affect our mental health, not just our children and young people, but also us. The difference is, as James mentioned before, children and young people are still developing. So their concept of time, their understanding of the world, it's still developing, and it's also different to ours, where we have that experience, or we're a bit more able to deal with it, even if at times it feels like we're really not coping with it. So it's almost like just thinking about it in the sense from a child point. If you've ever gone on a road trip with a child, even a teenager, maybe a very sulky, bored teenager, and you're on a really long road trip, and along the journey, they just keep asking you, are we there yet? Like, are we there yet? When are we getting there? How long is left now? Can you go faster? Can you hurry up? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And over time, that can be really frustrating. But this is more than just a car journey, because actually what they're asking are things like, can we go back to school yet? Do we have to go back to school yet? When can we see our friends yet? When is this going to be over? When are you going to spend more time with me? When can we do this? When can we do that? And so on. The question can be relentless. Most of the time, they might not actually be asking those questions, they might just be thinking it, and so they're lost in that storm of uncertainty in their head. The difficult part is, in this scenario, on a road trip, you'll probably have those answers. You know, if they were asking you, are we there yet at that destination, you probably have your sat nav and you say, another half an hour. Or we just got to go past this landmark and then we're nearly there. Or we're going to go to a petrol station just there, we can get a burger. But in this situation, we don't have the answers because we don't know ourselves. And so the uncertainty is there for us and for them. So it's just about trying to think about it from that point of view, actually, how frustrating that must be for young people who don't quite have a developed understanding of time and of the world. So we might ask, well, how do we navigate this period? And as James mentioned before, we've talked a lot about what is going to be the most useful time in this webinar. Is it about sharing practical strategies? And then we realise it's probably not going to be the most helpful. Why? Because you may already have your own. We have to remember that we're nearly a whole year into this pandemic. And of course, a lot of us will have had to be very resourceful, very adaptable, very creative. I've certainly surprised myself with how creative I've been at times. So actually, we don't want to just duplicate that information or just tell you what you already know. And actually, we do ask that if you do have your own strategies, even if you think it's not worked at time, please do share them in the chat box. I'm sure many of us would like to know. And it, can just be a way of just reassuring us that, we've tried our best. As James mentioned before, every young person and child, the YP, stands for young person. So every child or young person is different. What works for one might not work for the other. And there are resources. They are worth a read. It's definitely helpful because they do tell you or suggest things that you can do to try and help your child. But more importantly, they can be a really good way of normalising what we are experiencing as parents and normalising what our child are experiencing. It can help us to feel less alone and kind of realise that actually we're all in the same boat. And finally, we wanted to avoid sending you the message that you can fix it. Because while this pandemic is going on, as Jen mentioned, we can't fix it. All we can do is be a rock in their emotional storm and just help them to go through it and navigate this period as best they can. So what we do want to share with you is how can we be towards our children and how can we respond to them that enables them to have positive experiences. So with this, we wanted to specifically focus on communication. Communication is so important because how we interact and how we respond to our children, especially when they're feeling unhappy or they're in a heightened state of emotion, such as anger or frustration, can have a real impact in terms of how they then respond to their own emotion and how they respond to us. Communication is also really important because at the best of times, our communication with our children can become very strained, especially when we're experiencing stressful situations like we are now. And so if that communication is broken down, and it's reasonable to expect that it has broken down to some degree, then whatever we suggest that our children do, or activities that they do, things like to fix it or to get out of that mood and to snap them out of it, it may have very little success because they may be feeling like you're not listening to them, or they're feeling like they're just not being understood. And secondly, communication, focusing on our communication with them is also really important because especially for young children, they may not have the words to articulate what they're feeling, but also for older children, it can be quite difficult, especially if they're having problems with expressing themselves. You know, there may be additional considerations there, for example, learning difficulties or, you know, speech impairment, hearing loss. All of these things can also have such a big impact. So we just wanted to kind of think about our communication with them. The first part, in terms of how do we improve our communication with our children and how do we help them to navigate this emotional storm and all these mental health difficulty, anxiety, depression that they may be feeling. There's two parts. The first part involves listening to ourselves as parents, so listening to our inner critic. Now, Sam Malins and I have also hosted a webinar previously about the inner critic, and I think Claire will share that in the chat box. It is worth watching, especially toward the end part of the webinar where I specifically talk about the inner critic and how to recognise it. There is also a wellbeing video, that's a 3-minute video, and that is where I talk about the inner critic again. It's all me again, I'm just talking again, but it's all about what is that inner critic, how do we recognise it, and how do we respond to it. So the idea is that as parents, or you know, we have contact with children, when we see them as being unhappy or teenagers feeling really frustrated, and we feel really helpless and feel like we don't know what else to do, our inner critic will go into an overdrive. It will literally leap forward and it will take advantage of the situation. And this can play a huge role in how we communicate with our children. So when our inner critic arrives, there are different types of thoughts that we may experience. Thoughts around how we are as parents and whether we're being good enough. Thoughts about our children, how we see them. For example, oh, he's just been so difficult, or she's been really grumpy, they just don't understand. They're so depressed, they're never going to get better. This is it now, they're doomed. Our ability to help them, I don't know what to do, I can't help them, I'm failing them as a parent. All about the world outside. I'm so angry at the situation, I'm so fed up. I can't believe this is happening, I don't know what to do about it. Just take a moment and just think about whether any of these types of thoughts come up for you. You may have specific thoughts, or if you can recognise that you do have these kind of thoughts, please feel free to share them in the chat box and just think about how they might affect your communication or the way you are with your children. And does that then affect the way they respond back to you? There may be other types of thoughts that I haven't covered on this slide, so please do add because I'll be interested to hear them. Just a quick reminder then, from a CBT point of view, cognitive behavioural therapy, which is a psychological model, the idea is that the way we think about things, the thought that we experience, can really affect the way we feel about something. So it can cause a positive emotion if we're thinking something positive, or it can cause a negative emotion if we're thinking about something negative, such as anger, frustration, stress, anxiety. Understandably, this had an impact on our behaviour, in terms of how we are to ourselves and towards others, where importantly to remember we may also be unkind to ourselves in the process. And finally, it can cause a particular type of consequence to arrive, whether it's desired or undesired. So there is a pattern here, which is why we're talking about this, and this kind of thing can affect our communication. So I want to share with you a personal situation to illustrate the inner critic. And think about how that actually happens for me. So about last year in March or April time, probably at the beginning of the pandemic when everything was really new, really frightening, really scary, I was told that, okay, you need to work from home, got to find a new way to communicate with your patients, but also your son is going to be off nursery for 4 to 5 months and you've just got to be with him full time. At the time, he was 18 months. Very active and very, very, you know, mummy's boy. He still is. I'm still working on that, but very, very mummy's boy at that time. And so I was juggling with all of this, and I used to pride myself before the pandemic started that I was somebody that was very organised. I was somebody that was very efficient, very boundaries. I worked within my set hours, but also as a mum, I had a very clear vision on what kind of mum that I wanted to be very hands-on and very engaged. So when I was struggling all of this, it was difficult. I found myself being less present, less engaged, doing less things and just doing more basic things with my son. He noticed and he picked up on it, and what he did was he became clingy, for a better word, in the sense that he just wanted more time. He became very, very demanding. So that attention-seeking behaviour that someone mentioned earlier, he was doing that. And what also didn't help was that I was going on social media because my social connections had just shrunk and I just had my phone to escape to. And I just found all these pictures of other parents or teachers or just posts by people of doing all these amazing things with their children, like baking day or rainbows or, I don't know, creating airplanes or something. And I was just thinking, oh my God, I'm just doing really basic things with my kid. And I just felt really bad. So my inner critic went into an overdrive. So the situation that I found myself in was that I was having a lot of thoughts about my son. Most repetitively, I was having the thought that he is so clingy. Like, oh my God, he's so clingy. So I was having a particular thought about him, which then generated frustration and annoyance at him, towards him, and just the situation. But alongside, I also felt some guilt because I thought I shouldn't be feeling this way. And I was trying to beat myself up over it. Then I realised that actually what I was doing, looking back, was that I was half playing with him, but half ignoring him. And I'd be a bit inconsistent in my attention to him. So I'll be saying things like, just go and play with that. Or can you just give me 10 minutes while I just make the dinner, or I need to catch up on my housework. Why are you being so clingy today? What's the matter with you? Yeah, I'm listening. Oh, I got it. Yeah. Well done. Okay. Do you just want to watch Gritty and Lemon today? Just go and watch TV for a bit, and then I'll come and join you. What would happen is that he'd play up more to get my attention, and he'd become more clingy. So then I'd respond, right, that's enough now. Stop being silly. Don't make me count to 3 again. If you do that again, I'm going to count to 3 and I'm going to take that object off you. Obviously, over time, I realised a bit later on in the day, oh, you know what, I wasn't being my best and I wasn't being fair to him. So other thoughts would crop up, other negative self-defeating thoughts. And before you know it, it just went on and on and on. Now, this situation is relevant to all of us. I'm just using this with my 18-month, now 2.5-month son, but you could easily apply this kind of thought pattern to, say, teenagers, for example. If they're slamming doors and you're being really frustrated, or they're being really mardy, or why they're just not understanding me. They should be grown up now. What I'm trying to illustrate here is that the way we're thinking and the way we're feeling, which is driven by our inner critic, does affect the way we respond to them, and it creates missed opportunities to try and respond to them in a different way. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. What I wanted to do was, even though we're not sharing a particular strategy, I just wanted to share with you a useful framework, and it's called PACE. The idea is that PACE is a way of, well, it was developed by a clinical psychologist called Dan Hughes over 20 years ago. And the aim of this framework was for adults to build trusting, safe and meaningful relationships with children and young people who've experienced trauma. So it's born out of trauma work. However, it's very relevant now because our children, young people, teenagers, ourselves, we've all experienced trauma called COVID-19. We've all resulted that loss of connection and all those changes. And so it's very, very relevant. And for young people and children, it may have left them feeling quite uncontained, left with uncertainty. And so this framework is about how do we try and respond to that in a better way. So using PACE, if we use this framework, it can actually help us to slow down our reactions, to stay calm and tune into what that child or teenager is experiencing. Guide that child through heightened emotions, thoughts and behaviours. In turn, it helps them to feel connected and understood, and it helps them to slow down their emotions. Sounds good, right? So what is PACE and how do we actually use it? Well, PACE stands for playfulness, acceptance, curiosity and empathy. It is what we use in terms of how we communicate with people. So in our communication, we might use playfulness. So this is about creating a light, fun atmosphere, using a light tone when we notice our child is in a state of anger or frustration or anxiety. It's not about minimizing what they're feeling, and it's not about making jokes, but it's about helping them to open up to their emotion and create positive experiences in dealing with it in the right way or in a better way. Acceptance. So this is about accepting the child's inner world. So their thoughts, feelings and behaviour at that time, in that moment, we accept it as something that they are experiencing. Whether we agree with it or not, it's something that they're experiencing, so we don't judge it. We don't accept their behaviour, that's a different thing, but we try to understand what's driving that behaviour. So curiosity is thinking about the meaning underneath that behaviour, like, okay, they're slamming the doors, what they're feeling, like why are they doing that? So you might be asking questions like, oh, what was that about, earlier, when they've had a chance to calm down a little bit and a bit more receptive to you, what was that about earlier? I'm really curious. Shall we have a bit of a chat about it? It's also about thinking about what brings the best out of them. What drives them, what interests them, what brings the best out of them. Try and get them to come out of their shells a little bit more. And then empathy. This is about putting ourselves in their shoes, literally. So allowing ourselves to feel what they're feeling. It is so essential in order for them to feel connected to us and to feel validated. So I'm just going to quickly share with you an example of how you actually use PACE. And this is a real example again, but this time it's with my niece. So my sister's daughter, who is 7 years old. And obviously me and my sister, we constantly chat on the phone about our children, politely moaning about them. But what we do say is we try to share strategies. And actually she was telling me about a particular time where she was refusing to eat her dinner. She was playing aggressively with her food, saying, I don't like this and I don't want to eat this. I just want to be on my own. And I was thinking about this. That's probably something that we all experience from time to time, and especially more so because we're just at home with them all the time. So the typical responses that we might do if we had this sort of situation: just eat your dinner now. No pudding. Can I just say that's my sister's personal favourite? No pudding. She'll sometimes say it to me as well. Or 5 bites now, just come on. We'll go into a pleading tone, like, come on, just 5 more bites and then you're done. Fine, go to your room. Just go to your room, no snack, don't come out of your room till bedtime. Or we might go into a lecturing tone. I know you're really upset, but this is not the way to behave. You should know better. So in this kind of situation, the first thing we want to do is just pause. So think about PACE. It's all about slowing down our emotions, and it's all about slowing down our reaction. Just press pause. However you do it, if you need to leave the room and just shut yourself away from them for 1 minute and just breathe, or if you need to go and eat a bar of chocolate, or if you need to just go outside and stick your head out the window, even if it's raining, do so. But pausing can just help you to accept the situation and think about how you want to work through it and choose how to respond differently. Your inner critic, all those emotions that's going on behind the scenes, you're giving them a chance to kind of just back down a little bit before you respond. This can lead to receptivity. So it might help you to lead to acknowledge what the child or the young person or teenager is thinking and feeling. What are you thinking and feeling? It might help you to create an opportunity to respond differently, and ultimately to help both of you feel validated. So always just press time, just press pause, make some time to pause. So using PACE then, so coming back to that situation with my niece, if we use a playful response, and you can use either PACE, you don't have to use all of them in one go. You can use them at different times and see what works. But a playful response might be, it looks like a storm had landed on that plate. Look at all those food mixed up. It looks a little bit unappealing now. Are you okay? You look really upset. Why don't we go and sit in the living room and see if we can get you smiling again? We can sort dinner out later, or we can have it a bit later on. That might be something that you might want to try. So just acknowledging what they're doing, acknowledging that they might be feeling something and offering them a potential to do something about it. Accepting response, the A of PACE. Oh wow, I can see that you really aren't feeling up to eating together. Do you know, I have those days too where I just find it really hard and my feelings get the better of me. Or if there's something, and this might be something that an older child or a teenager child might say, oh, you just hate me, or you've just been really horrible to me. We might want to respond with, do you know what, I'm really sorry, I didn't realise you felt this way. Rather than say something that's not true, or when have I ever done that? Because what's happening there is that you're not validating, you're not understanding that that's what they're feeling at that time. A curious response might be, that's odd, you usually really like your food. I wonder what's different about today. I know it's been quite isolating and tough. Or are there things that are on your mind? You might want to do that at the time, or you might want to do it a bit later on. And finally, the empathy response. Oh, I can see you look really unhappy today. You seem quite angry and quite sad. Is that right? Sorry, the picture of James is blocking that last text, so I'm just going to let you read that last bit. And then the bit I can say is, shall we work together and figure out how to make you feel better? So it's just putting yourself in their shoes and validating what they're feeling. These aren't fix-it strategies. What these are is an opportunity to open the conversation and help them to recognise what they're feeling and to consider if there's a different way of dealing with that and doing it as a team. Because that's what they need. They need to feel like they've got somebody in their corner helping them through this really emotional storm that they're in at that moment in time. So it'd be interesting to hear what you think of this and whether this is something you are already aware of or something that you might want to try. So the key messages are, as we're coming toward the end of our webinar, is that we can't fix it all. I wonder how many of you came today expecting or hoping for a toolkit of strategies to go home and just magically cure the children's behaviour or young person's behaviour and just make them happy. But we can't. We also need to remember that we've got to be kind to ourselves and model it. The more we model it and the more we are transparent about the way we are feeling to them, the more it helps them to choose how to respond as well. Let them know that you're figuring it out too. We don't always have the answers. And sometimes we can go so far to protect them and somehow expect that they know how to look after the inner world, when actually we need to give them a bit more credit and a bit more opportunity and a bit more, kind of like scaffolding, like sort of holding their hand a little bit and encouraging them to sort of help them to look after their own inner world. And then finally, just remember, it's all about being kind to yourself. It's a really tough time right now. We might not always be good at implementing the things that we know, like we talked about earlier with the name and normalising. That's okay. It's fine. We're tired. So make sure you do take care of yourself. Do nourish some things. Give yourself a break from being a mum or a dad. Tag teams if you can. Seek support when we need it. So there are staff wellbeing offers including BibUp, the webinars and occupational health. And to connect with other people, so James are blocking that bit, to connect with the other people there, which is always can be quite undervalued. I think what we want to say is that we can always put a lot of weight on the strategies in terms of trying to fix it or find the latest strategy or trying to think about what we need to know. And actually we forget that we just need to be there for ourselves and for them. And on that note, we wanted to end it with, remember that this quote that James actually shared, so this isn't mine, this is James that he shared by Charlie Mackesy. So being kind to yourself is one of the greatest kindness. And that's really what we want to kind of end this webinar on. So thank you for listening. We are going to go to question and answers, but I do appreciate we may have gone over time or literally coming to 2 o'clock on the dot. So if you do need to go, that's okay. But please do evaluate. Claire, if you wouldn't mind putting the evaluation link in again so that people can take it away with them. I'm just going to come out of my slide.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, we do know that people might need to leave at 2 o'clock. So if that's the case, absolutely fine. But if anybody's able, we'll stay around for another 10 minutes and try and take some questions if there are any. Claire, I don't know. I'm getting a bit of an echo. I hope that's not. I don't know if that's coming through for everybody else as well.
Oh, I can hear the echo as well. Okay.
Did we have any questions that came up in the chat box? I've been trying to monitor it as we go along. I didn't see any specific questions. I don't know if there's anything further back that I might have missed. Of course, it's absolutely fine if there aren't questions. That's, you know, there's a lot to be thinking about, really.
I don't think there was any specific questions, but I think people were saying they're going to find the PACE model really helpful.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So I'm just reading all the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, like I say, I didn't see any specific questions, so we won't kind of drag things out. But I think it's just really to say, you know, access those resources that are out there. This has been recorded. Watch it back. You know, use those links that we've posted in the chat and on the PowerPoints as well, and just really kind of see what's out there. And of course, you know, speak to people who might be able to support you as well.
Absolutely. If there are any questions or any comments, please do email James or myself or Claire as well. We'll be more than happy to answer any of those.
Mm-hmm. I think we'll bring it to an end there just because there's no other questions coming in. But I just want to reiterate that last slide, like, you know, especially because there's a couple of comments towards the end about, you know, feeling quite, you know, like that it's challenging when these things show up. And I think like just being kind to yourself is such an important message. Like, you're doing a good job like that. You're doing what you can in a really difficult situation. And so, you know, let's treat ourselves with a bit of kindness and look after ourselves. And give ourselves a bit of a break when things don't necessarily go how we wanted them to go. I think that's a really key thing for me.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along. We really appreciate it, especially as we know that many of you may be on half term as well. So we do appreciate it. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah. So thank you very much, and I hope the rest of your day goes well.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.